Cape Cod has seen countless shipwrecks over the centuries. Its shifting shoals and sandbars have always been hazardous to passing vessels, especially on the Atlantic Ocean facing coastline. Between Race Point Beach in Provincetown and the southern tip of Monomoy Island in Chatham, there's nearly 50 miles of some of the most dangerous waters in the world. Estimates by the National Park Service say that there are upwards of 1,000 lost vessels in what is commonly referred to as an ocean graveyard. Legendary wrecks include the 17th century Sparrowhawk, the 18th century Whydah pirate ship, the 19th century Portland, and the 20th century Pendleton. Even vessels as large as the 473-foot Eldia, which was grounded on Nauset Beach in 1984, have not been able to escape the pull of the Cape sandbars. And I spoke about the Eldia earlier, way back in episode 21 of the podcast, if you want to hear about my firsthand eyewitness accounts of seeing that. But some of these vessels, like the Sparrowhawk, they've been revealed due to the shifting sands and had their wooden carcasses removed and put on display in local museums. One wreck that has been appearing and disappearing over the last decade is that of the Montclair. Located on southern Nauset Beach, it's a glimpse into history and an adventure to explore. However, beyond that, it is a real ship and a real tragedy with numerous lives lost, which happened nearly a century ago. The vessel known as the Montclair was a three-masted schooner. The 371-ton wooden ship was built in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, Canada in 1918 and designated a transport vessel. It was owned by Captain C.B. Martin of Partridge Island, Nova Scotia. On Tuesday, March 1st, 1927, the 142-foot Montclair set sail from Halifax en route to New York City with a cargo of 2.5 million wood laths. It was headed by Captain William MacLeod with a total crew of 7 men. That same day, a British vessel, the Frederick H., also left Nova Scotia with New York as its destination. Neither would reach it. The very next day, the vessels began to feel the effects of a strong late winter storm raging in from the southwest. Winds of up to 60 miles an hour tore at the ships as they rounded Provincetown and headed down through the shoals of the Atlantic side of Cape Cod on March 3rd. Captain MacLeod, though, he had the utmost confidence in his vessel and pressed on. The wind and waves pounded the Montclair and began pushing it towards the shore as it headed past Nauset Beach. The ship lost 2 of its 3 masts, the fore and mizzen masts. Unable to control the vessel, they could only hang on as it was pushed into the sandbars roughly a mile offshore just south of Nauset Beach. It was at this point, early on March 4th, that the peril of the Montclair awakened Captain Edward L. Clark. Clark was part of a skeleton crew of 3 men at the Coast Guard Station, number 40, located just east of Little Potchet Island, 2.5 miles south of the current Nauset Beach parking lot in Orleans. The station had been designated inactive in the early 1920s, ironically due to the fact that there had not been any shipwrecks in that area for decades. Clark notified the Provincetown and Old Harbor Coast Guard stations, and people rushed to the scene. After one last attempt to swing the Montclair clear of the shoals, it was tossed up onto the sand where it was beaten by the waves of the high-rising tide. The brave Coast Guard crews headed out into the wind and waves for an attempted rescue, even managing to shoot 3 weighted lines over the stern of the crippled ship. 5 members of the ship's crew grabbed onto one line, while the other 2 men grabbed another before the Montclair was broken in half near the middle. The 5 crew members on the one line, including Captain MacLeod, were washed overboard, while the other 2 men were picked up and brought back to shore. The splintered ship was eventually lifted off the sandbar by the tides, where it was tossed up onto the sands of Nauset Beach. Its cargo of wood laths scattered for miles along the sand. The 2 survivors of the wreck, Nathan Bagg and Gartland Short, were treated for hypothermia and hysteria at the Coast Guard station. The body of Captain MacLeod was quickly recovered, while 3 of the other 4 missing were also quickly pulled from the water as the storm subsided and the sea calmed. The 5th and final deceased member of the Montclair's crew was discovered March 15th on North Beach in Chatham by Wesley Eldridge, mostly buried under the sand. Much like with the grounding of the Eldia decades later, countless residents came out to see the wreck of the Montclair, with some of them helping themselves to the unbroken wood laths that had been deposited all along the coast. Considered to be the worst maritime disaster on the Cape in more than 25 years, questions were raised as to whether more lives could have been saved if the Orleans Coast Guard Station had been active. The Frederick H., which had left Nova Scotia the same day as the Montclair, also ran into the same destructive storm as it sailed around Cape Cod. Badly damaged as well, it managed to limp its way into Vineyard Haven, only thanks to constant pumping of water from the hold and galley of the vessel by the crew. Interestingly, along the coast of Cape Cod at the same time, author Henry Beston was residing at his Forecastle beach shack, writing his soon-to-be classic, The Outermost House. The news of the wreck of the Montclair made its way to Beston, who immortalized the disaster in his book's 6th chapter. Deputy Collector Thomas Finnegan reported to the scene from New Bedford with a team of 8 men, as the Montclair had been a suspected rum-running vessel. He questioned the 2 survivors, but did not secure any useful information. One blessing from the disaster of the wreck was that the Orleans Coast Guard Station was restored to full strength after it happened. The shifting sands have buried and uncovered the remains of the Montclair several times over the decades. In the 2010s, it was revealed repeatedly, each time slightly more decayed than before. The wood is soft and rotting away, while the iron is rusty and gives the ship a ghostly skeletal appearance currently. It is nearly a 2.5-mile walk over the sand to reach the remains of the Montclair. Though an interesting adventure taking the walk out to find its remains, it's a somber and solemn reminder of the dangers of the sea. It's important to remember the 5 men who lost their lives aboard the Montclair as well. They were William Downing, William Stewart, George Keynes, Jerome Butler, and Captain William McLeod. And like I said, my buddy Steve and I, we walked out there 2 years ago, basically this week I think it was, and found the remains of the ship. I'll throw a photo up on social media so you can see the skeletal appearance of it. You may still see it. I have not been back out there since, so I'm not saying you should go walk out to find it because it may not be there. It does get covered with sand and then revealed, and with the storms that we've had recently, I don't know the condition of it. If you do see it, you'll know it because there's a whole bunch of iron rods sticking up. It looks almost like a pincushion coming up out of the sand. But like I said, seemingly each time it gets covered and then revealed again, it's slightly more decayed, which at some point it's going to just fall apart and rust and all the iron will be gone and the wood is almost gone as well. That's the story, though, of the Montclair, one of so many hundreds of shipwrecks all around Cape Cod. It just goes to show you that you've got to respect the sea, because as we see with these huge winter storms that we've been getting, the sea can just take things away real quick. The erosion on Cape Cod is legit. It's constant. And honestly, who knows what the next big storm with the erosion, who knows what it might reveal. Maybe it'll be another shipwreck that has been long since forgotten, like the Montclair was.